Hello, I've just got home from the cinema, having just watched Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. It's a strange film, and it's a particularly hard film to review, I think, given the climate that's surrounding the film. It's been a particularly strange build-up, hasn't it? We've all had a lot to say about what we dislike and from what we'd seen in the build-up, and I think all of that is extremely relevant, and all of that is extremely hard to not see through. All of those things that, you know, channels like the Critical Drinker and Nerd Erotic and Disparu and all of those channels have all highlighted what, you know, I think a lot, and I think actually the majority of people online have highlighted stuff like the Viking longship, the dialogue, the American accents, and the supposed DEI casting. All of that is impossible to see beyond. You're not going to be able to watch this film if you've seen anything in the build-up, if you've seen any kind of speculation surrounding the film. You're not going to be able to see beyond that. But also, you're not going to be able, if like me, you've noticed that there's an incredible push behind this film from not just Hollywood, but the sort of mainstream media. I haven't seen a film this well advertised and this well pushed onto the general public in a long time. This is everywhere. This film is literally everywhere. I'm seeing adverts on it on buses driving past, on billboards, which I haven't really seen a lot of billboards in a long time. Where I live, they've kind of become a thing of the past. But everywhere you look is The Odyssey. Hollywood and the media are working together to create kind of a spectacle around this film. I think they want big things from this film, given Nolan's recent success, well, not recent success, but recent past success, shall we say, with Oppenheimer. This doesn't have the Barbie film to help prop it up, but I also don't think it's going to need it. I think this film is going to do incredibly well, and I'll get to that in a little bit. Let me just rattle through some notes. So I took my trusty notepad with me, and I've literally just typed up the notes which are on the screen in front of me. So this isn't scripted. This is, you know, stream of consciousness. This is my, you know, reaction straight home from the cinema. There you go. I got one of these, which is pretty cool, to be honest. I haven't been to the IMAX in a long while, and I got one of these, which is cool. Look, you know, you're not going to be able to see beyond those things that have already been highlighted as you know, just things that are glaringly obvious. So the dialogue is a huge issue. So you've got dads coming back, you've got mom, don't give up, and then you've got, you know, the F word being thrown around. I'm not sure if I can say it or not, given this is YouTube, but you know, the modern language is also a big thing. There's a lot of, like I say, that modern language in there, but it's interwoven with sort of classical language as well. If you know what I mean, it's just jarring, really. I've seen that word being thrown around a lot about the Odyssey, and there's no greater word to sum it up, in my opinion. A lot of it is just incredibly jarring. So the American accents are hard to deal with for me. I know it'll probably be seen as maybe a silly thing to say, you know, for modern audiences, and particularly amongst critics, but the American accents are brutal. They really are. They really cast you out of immersion. At points it's fine. Like you can get a little bit lost in it at certain points, but then something will happen, or, you know, another actor will come onto the screen, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, hang on, no, I'm focusing on that now, you know, or I can hear that, you know, the way that one of the actors will be a little bit more American than another one of the actors who will be a little bit more almost well-spoken. It's just jarring. It's really jarring. And that, like I say, is really a through line throughout this film, is that it just can't get out of its own way. It's largely like the rest of Hollywood in that respect. It won't let itself just leave you alone in certain respects. It's a film that, you know, it won't be able to escape its online criticism. we've all seen that, like that Viking longship. Like I say, we've all seen the armor, and we've all seen the modernity that's thrown in there. And so, yeah, it's a film that's going to be tainted by that. But that being said, the cinematics throughout are absolutely amazing. Some of them are really, really well done. There are some set pieces in this film which are really, really well done. At first, it was a little bit strange for me to see Nolan use the same kind of camera moves and sort of landscape establishing shots that he used to introduce Gotham. He certainly uses that here, which is just a little bit weird. It's just weird for Sword and Sandals to see that kind of modern camera move. And it's just, again, that word jarring. It's just it just takes you out of the immersion that it sets up for itself. It's a very confusing film in terms of that. But that being said, like I say, there are periods of this film which are really, really good. There are some cinematic moments in this which genuinely I did get lost in, and I was like, wow, that's really well done. But then again, modernity just keeps getting in the way. It keeps just taking you out of it. And like I say, modernity just keeps getting in the way, which is just really annoying. It's a film that is determined. You can tell, Nolan, I think, was just, and the cast and crew, I think all of them were determined to create an immersive world that sucked you in. But for some reason, it's a film, it's a crew, it's a cast that are also determined to suck you out of the immersion almost frames later. It's just a disappointing film on that front. And talking about the cast, so I made some notes on the cast, and I'll just rattle through that. I'm not going to comment on every beat of the film because we'll be here for literally 3 hours. So just diving into the cast, you've got Tom Holland, who I didn't think was that bad, actually. I think he was let down by the dialogue, and he was let down by the need, and it is a real need, to have an American accent. Obviously, Holland is an English chap, but if he spoke with his natural accent, I think it would be so strange in this film that it would stand out like a sore thumb. It really would. And that's a shame, I think. I think his performance is okay. I think he's all right in it. But I think he could have been a lot better if he was just his natural self. And I couldn't really get beyond. I know it's a strange thing to say because he's an actor in a film, but it didn't feel like he was coming across as his natural self in many regards. Which, again, it was just one of those things that you realize you're in your head while you're watching it, and so you're not immersed in it. Again, just puts you in and then pulls you out of immersion. Zendaya, well, she does her usual scowl thing, and at one point it was almost a meme. There's this sequence where she just goes from scowl to scowl to scowl to scowl, and it was just, like I say, it was a meme. It almost made me laugh out loud. It certainly made me chuckle. Samantha Morton, I thought, was one of the better performances as Cersei. That whole set piece there probably is one of the better ones in the film. I really enjoyed that whole sequence. I thought it was done quite well. Agamemnon, played by I had to look his name up. Sorry, Benny Safdie, is responsible for one of the most unintentionally funny moments, I think, in cinematic history. During the Hades scene, I'm not going to ruin it, but and now that I've highlighted it, I may have ruined it for you, but it literally made me laugh out loud. John Leguizamo, I thought, was pretty good. In fact, he was one of the better members of the cast in it, if you ask me. Theron as Calypso, I thought she was okay. Not too bad. Moving on to the lead then. So Matt Damon, I know obviously was a controversial choice. I said in my trailer reaction, I just don't see him as Odysseus. I don't think he does a particularly bad job. I still don't think he was a good choice. I still don't think he's really Odysseus to me. And obviously the accent and again the dialogue, just they don't help. And as you watch the film, I think he, as you get to the end of the film and you kind of realize the reflection that Odysseus is having throughout, it makes sense the way that he plays him. Again, he doesn't do a bad job, but clearly he was chosen for the more Batman-esque scenes that come towards the end. It's a film that very much becomes Jason Bourne in antiquity, which was okay. it was fine. It wasn't a bad action scene. It was just very much the case that I thought I was watching a Jason Bourne film. But the cast in general, I think performances are largely okay. I don't think anybody stands out. I don't think anybody stands out, like I say, for good or bad reasons. I saw some speculation earlier in the week about the sort of DEI casting and how they're literally, in it for like a matter of seconds. And that's true. Even Elliot Page is in it not very long. Doesn't do particularly well. Doesn't do particularly bad. And all of the sort of, what you could call DEI hires, none of them do bad. None of their performances are god awful and terrible. But the problem is that you just like that's the critical drinkers and the nerd erotics and the likes of them have said it's just immersion breaking. It doesn't feel genuine, and I actually felt quite sorry watching the film because I just felt like this person isn't there necessarily on merit alone, which must feel, I don't know, it must be a hollow feeling as an actor to know that you didn't earn that place on merit and merit alone. And don't get me wrong, actors don't necessarily win parts on merit and merit alone, but yeah, it felt like obviously the ones that were there to sort of tick that Oscar diversity checklist were there, and there's an awful lot of them, and there's the one key part where one of the actors says we're Greeks from Ithaca, and it's just one of those points where it's like it's just immersion breaking. And I feel, like I say, it made me feel sorry for them that they're not there on merit alone. But anyway, I'll move on. I'll leave that there, and I'll leave that to the interpretation of you, the viewer, if and or when you go to see it. Just a note on the editing. I thought it was a really, really fast film, all the way up to the final act, which then slows down an awful lot, and not in a particularly bad way. I thought actually, sorry if this is a spoiler for you for a 2,000 plus year old story, but when Odysseus finally gets home, I thought that was one of the stronger parts of the film. I thought actually it was done really well, and it slows right down there, and it kind of allows the cast to actually perform, and Matt Damon, I think, is really good in that. When that bit slows down and you understand more about the character, which isn't really that well developed until that final act, and then obviously it just bursts into Jason Bourne in Antiquity, which again was okay, but it was like, this is the Odyssey. It didn't feel like the Odyssey. I don't know, maybe that's just my old man interpretation of it, but yeah, I thought pacing really weird, all over the place. The disjointed narrative, which is obviously a bit of a Nolan trope, is okay. It feels like it's done in a way that Nolan went, well, yeah, this is my film, so it's going to be disjointed and all over the place, and you'll have to deal with it. It's not that bad because it's like sort of flashback and callbacks and stuff. It's not bad, but it's not cleverly done. It felt like it was kind of a trope in itself, kind of like I say, Nolan saying, this is a Nolan film and I'm going to do this just to mess with you. And it, again, not bad, but just not, it was just meh, really. I thought, he didn't really need to do that so much, apart from the ending where that it was nice to go back to Troy. And I have to say that the sacking of Troy was done very well at the end. And I'll just say that it was done very well at the end. It really felt like you were in the sacking of a long besieged city, and it felt in the IMAX with that sound design and everything, it felt quite genuine. It felt quite real, and that was one of the better parts of the film. But yeah, pacing wise, it felt a little bit all over the place at points. Again, come back to that word, jarring. It was jarring, and the whole armor choice, which was one of those bones for contention for people going into the film, and especially in the build-up. They make more sense now that I've seen the film, And I'll kind of leave that there. It's very self-explanatory once you watch the film why the Greeks are dressed in dark armor. Not very. Don't know. I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but it would have been nice to have seen a bit more bronze in the Bronze Age. But yeah, it makes more sense now that I've seen the film that armor is that color. And I'll just kind of leave that there, again, to interpretation. Trying to be spoiler-free as much as possible, but it's difficult. So I'll draw it to a bit of a close because I feel like I've been going on for a while. The film really feels like a wrestling match between a genuine, authentic, and honest retelling and modernity. It really does feel like they took myth and tried to just plateau it into the modern day. That being said, it isn't a horrendous film, and I want to shout that from the rafters. Really, I didn't hate it, and it was so close to being great. It really was. It was so close to being great, but the politics and the cultural war parts, they don't leave you alone, and so it's not easy to sit back and just immerse yourself in it. Even if we hadn't had all the build-up, I think you would still feel that because of the accents and because of the dialogue and because of, we're Greeks, but clearly this person doesn't look Greek and there are no Greeks in the film. And then paired with the Viking longship and the fact that it's not really sort of Grecian army, it's not armor, sorry, it's not really, the sort of classical way of speaking, and it is very Americanized and it's very modern. It felt like he was kind of having a dig at the Greeks a little bit, and that may be just my interpretation, and I'm not accusing Nolan of going around hating on Greek culture and whatnot, but it felt like a real determined choice and a real blatant choice to not lean into anything that could remotely be ancient Greek, which I thought was a bit of a shame and a little bit silly. That's a creative choice, I suppose. It may be a political choice, I don't know, but it didn't feel like an honest and genuine attempt to retell Homer's Odyssey. And again, those culture war points and that political stuff outside of the film, they're too hard a hurdle for I think a lot of us to jump over. But that being said, when I left the cinema, I was in a lift going down into the car park, and I asked a couple of people that were holding these things, so I know they'd been, and I said, "Did you go to see the Odyssey?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "What did you think?" And they all loved it. They all thought it was brilliant. So, I mean, based on the cinema that I went to, based on the screening that I was in, it was busy. It was very busy, and everyone seemed to enjoy it. So I think the film will do well. I think the normies, as people like to call culture war people, I think they're going to love it. I think they're going to really like it. I think if you don't know the Odyssey that well, or you only kind of have like an outside knowledge of it, then you're not really going to care that there's a lot of points of the tale that are kind of stepped over or done at pace really, really quickly. Achilles is not in it at all. And obviously, as we know, Elliot Page was rumoured to play Achilles, and then all of a sudden we found out that Page was playing Sinon, which is a character that's not even in the Odyssey or the Iliad. I think that's probably going to launch 1,000 YouTube videos, because there's so much that you could read into, not only with Page's casting, but the character and the relationship between Page, in the real world, and the character from and how literature kind of remembers Sinon or Sinon, however you want to say it. It's just a strange choice. But okay, so if I had to put a score on it, I've been thinking about it. It was so close to being great, this film. It was so close to being brilliant and cinematic and would blow you away. I think you're going to lack something if you don't watch this in IMAX. So I think if you're going to wait for it to go to streaming, you're going to be incredibly disappointed. I think a lot of this film and a lot of, I think, Nolan's films actually need to be seen in the cinema. They need to be seen in IMAX, which is how you should see them. So if you're going to wait for streaming, you're going to be disappointed. I think if you go and watch this in the cinema without watching too many reviews, maybe you might enjoy it. Particularly if you're not sort of in the sort of trenches of the culture war, you're going to probably enjoy it a lot. The critics are right behind this film, and I don't really know why, because I don't think it was that great, but I don't think it was that bad. I would give it a solid 4.5 out of 10, and it could have been so easily a 9 if it wasn't for all of the amazing immersion building, and then frames later, the way that the film just sucks you clear out of that immersion and doesn't let you sit and doesn't let you rest in it. If it wasn't the Odyssey, if it was just another story that had, you know, its own, you know, sort of telling, but still had these cinematic elements, I think it would be a good film. But for me, the immersion killing is just too hard to ignore. And that really is all I have to say. It's a very good foundation of a good film, but it just wasn't able to get out of its own way. And so 4.5 out of 10. Thank you very much for watching. If you got all the way to the end, please do consider giving me a like, leaving me a comment, and then subscribing. Don't forget to hit the bell icon as well. Let me know your thoughts on the Odyssey. Are you going to see it if you haven't already? And if you have seen it, let me know your thoughts on it, because I genuinely would like to know if people are going to be able to see beyond the immersion breaking, and whether you can just enjoy it for what it is. There were points where I did enjoy it, but it just wasn't enough to keep me all the way through for a solid 9-ish out of 10. And so thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.